Hey, welcome to the Best Gay Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Trevor Hoppy. Today's episode is about taking time. You know, it occurs to me that in today's day and age, saying you like something slow is kind of taboo. We want fast food, fast fashion, and even think about Amazon. 2-day delivery apparently wasn't fast enough. We want it overnight. We want it now, baby. When it comes to sex, just think about Grindr. The quickie has never been more in vogue. But today's guest wants us to slow down and smell the rosebuds. Manny Ocasio finds the pleasure in the anticipation, the waiting, the teasing. And when the moment finally comes, he urges us to savor it, not let it slip between our fingers. Born in the hustle and bustle of New York City, where life moves pretty fast, Manny now works on his Girl Bi podcast and Cosmic Stoners lifestyle brand from the sunny beaches of Puerto Rico, where island time moves a little slower. Let's listen in. Manny Ocasio, welcome to the Best Gay Sex Podcast.
Hi.
Hey,
I'm so excited to be on this podcast. The set is gorgeous.
Thank you. We've renovated. It's great. I'm thrilled to have you with us. You are talking to us from Puerto Rico, yes?
Yes.
The lovely island of Puerto Rico. But before Puerto Rico, tell us a little bit about where you grew up. You obviously have the podcast Girl Bi now. We'll get to that, but just go back in time. Where did you start your journey?
Yeah. So I grew up in New York, New York City kid. I grew up on Long Island most of my life, actually. Went to high school out there and then moved to Florida in my high school time, which was crazy. I advise anybody who has the opportunity, really think about it before you make those crazy decisions. Because it was very different leaving in the middle of high school and, trying to make new friends, you're graduating with people you don't know, like all of those little things. So like, it's kind of crazy, but, was in New York, moved to Florida. As we all know, Florida is, Florida. So I since then graduated high school and been on the move. I've lived in a couple different states, from going out to Kentucky and Ohio to living in the mountains in Virginia. So kind of been all over the place. Spent a little bit of time in North Carolina and then decided to come out to Puerto Rico for a while.
You've definitely been all over then. Where did you, remind me, your New York was high school? High school was New York?
Yeah, so I was born in New York. I was born on Long Island, and I lived there until I was 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm just trying to sort of
And then I went to Florida, and I went to Tampa, Florida from there, just north of Tampa, Florida, actually, because my dad bought a house out there. So we moved out there. And then, fun fact that not many people know, but if you become accepted on my Facebook and are able to go that far back, you can see where I turned 18 and I had a Toyota Yaris, a tiny little like golf cart sized car. And I put my own hitch on the back of that thing and tied a U-Haul to it. And I moved to Kentucky with that tiny little Yaris.
I don't think the Yaris is supposed to do that, but
No,
good
it
for
was
you.
definitely dragging itself there. By the time I got there, I needed new tires for sure.
And what was it like? I mean, did you know you were a little queer boy when you moved to Florida? Was that something you were already aware of?
Yeah, by that point, so I would say that up until like middle school, I was pretty much always pretty fluid. Luckily, I did grow up in a household where I had a gay dad. So there were some like religious things and like family members that would make comments or say things or whatever, but like in my personal home, I was never really like frowned upon. So my mom was really good about teaching us like love is love and you're going to care for somebody because you care for them, not really on like a intimate relationship wise, but more like, if somebody spends time with you, if somebody is invested in you, if somebody cares about you, you should care about them and you should like, build relationships based off of those types of things versus, building a relationship strictly on sex in the beginning, which I thought being a kid and being taught that really kept me open-minded, really kept me like, I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of people that I talked through over the years. I was never a shy kid. Even moving to Florida, I built friends pretty quickly because I'm a very outgoing person. And I think that all kind of boils down to being that open person as a kid.
And you said gay dad, and you just breezed right past that, but we have to talk about that. So, when did you discover that your dad was gay?
Yeah, so my parents got divorced when I was 5 or 6 years old. And pretty much shortly after that, my dad had his first partner and they were together. Um, and his first partner, they were together for a really long time, maybe 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years. I was really young. So I don't quite remember how many years. And then ever since then, my dad has always been with men, you know what I mean? So it was very much, he came out, they got divorced, and we kind of just lived life. Now, as an adult, it's a little different because now we learn a lot more about all the different situations in life. And, I learn more about my parents' relationships and things like that. So you kind of learn other pieces to it. But luckily enough, I got to live in a household where even though they got divorced, they never trash talked each other. They never bullied each other, things like that. We never got to see those types of things. They were always big on showing us you can get dealt a bad deck of cards, but you can still make it work.
Definitely. And what did it mean to you having a gay parent? I mean, that's an unusual experience for most of us, right? Because most of us experience difference, and you experience this kind of similarity. Did you talk to your dad about your own sexuality?
Never.
Really?
Yeah, I never talked to my dad about my sexuality ever in my life. I never actually came out to my family. Luckily enough, I was just one day showed up with a guy and was like, oh, this is my boyfriend. So, I never really had a big coming out moment or anything like that. I never felt comfortable enough to go to my dad about those types of things. I think a lot of people don't realize that even though you have a gay parent doesn't mean that the coming out process is any easier. Because I feel like a lot of the things that I did try to talk to my dad about in those early stages of me getting to understand who I was and what I liked and the people I wanted to be around, I got a lot of backlash. And I don't want to say he gave me bad advice, but I think he gave me advice from the concept of also trying to understand that if I was a cisgendered straight male, my life would be different. And I think he wanted to give me the best advice that he could give with still trying to not want me to go through those downsides of life and understanding you're going to get bullied, people are going to say things, you're going to go through these pieces of life. So I think he wanted to help me avoid those things. But ultimately, I felt like he knew he couldn't because, I mean, if you were a queer kid in the 90s and early 2000s, you were going to get bullied, right? So I think it kind of just went through that.
Yeah, definitely. But so you don't have this kind of coming out experience. When did you start to realize that you were gay?
So it's a funny story. I dated women up until my sophomore year of high school. So when I moved to Florida, I was a marching band kid. And if anybody knows marching band kids, we were crazy, fun, always wanted to have a good time. But I also went to a very competitive school for marching band. So we went to a lot of band competitions. We had band camp. We practiced 3 to 5 days a week. I mean, it was a extraneous process being in band because we did want to win. We wanted to be the best. We were constantly, in the top 5 in the state. Our goal was to be successful in band. And there was a boy that joined the color guard team that just so happened to catch my attention. And we spent a lot of time together. We lived, oddly enough, very close together. We lived enough close where I could ride my bike to get to his house. So I would get on my bike, I would go to his house, we would hang out. And then one day we started making out, and that was
Oh my God, this is like a movie experience.
yeah.
Wow. And did this person become like a boyfriend to you?
Yeah, he became a boyfriend of mine. I did a lot of firsts with that person.
Yeah.
Um, we had a good relationship for a while. I would say up until my senior year, I think we were like still close and still trying to like figure out life. But I think I was also trying to figure out who I was, what I wanted to accomplish, all the pieces of my life I wanted to like really live for. And I don't have fears, as you guys already know, because I can live anywhere and I'll pack a bag and go and see what happens. Um, so I think, getting with somebody that really had the mindset of like, oh my God, this is my first boyfriend and I'm in love and I want to be married and we're going to get married and we're going to have kids and all that stuff. I was terrified of all of those things, right? And I was like, there's no way. Like, I just turned 18. I'm ready to go experience life. I had Grindr by that point, and my friends were telling me about bathhouses and these parties that people were going to, and these college parties and sex parties and things like that. And I was like, why would I want to not experience life yet? Because I don't even know if I like those things or don't like those things. I have never gotten that moment to try it or see it or be around it. So our relationship at that point kind of went left because I was ready to enjoy life and learn what it was to be an adult, and they weren't.
Yeah. Well, you're 18. I mean, who is ready to make those
Right.
decisions at that age? But I just can't even, like, that's hard to even for me to fathom to have that kind of relationship like that in high school because it just was so different from my own experience. But is this your friends knew about this relationship or was this something you kept private?
No, I mean, we would go to Busch Gardens and hold hands all day. We would
My
cuddle for
God.
hours. Everybody in band knew that we were together. He was the only one that wouldn't be with the color guard girls on the bus. He would be with us band kids in the back of the bus because he wanted to sit next to me. Yeah, no, it was everybody knew. Everybody knew. Everybody knew. Yeah.
It was very
I
tender.
think, actually, let me not say that. There might be a photo on the internet somewhere of us holding hands in Busch Gardens
Oh, well,
somewhere
that's
on the internet.
sweet. That's
Yeah.
sweet. And so it sounds like you had some of your first sexual experiences also in the context of this relationship.
Yeah. Some of my the first person that I topped in my life was that person. And then the first threesome that I've ever done was with that person.
Okay. Just
Yeah.
curiosity, how did that come about?
That came about later when so I went to college in Tampa, Florida, went to college out there, worked out there, like kind of pretty much started spending a lot more time over there versus Spring Hill, which is where I'm originally from, which is like 40 minutes away. All of my friends ended up kind of moving that direction. So like that's where we would go hang out and meet people and whatever. And at this point, I was a college kid and they had graduated and we went to a party and we were doing all this, meeting people, hanging out. Um, we may or may not have been on Molly and we just had like fun,
Uh-huh. I bet you did.
And so life was an adventure and we just that whole situation just kind of came upon itself. You know what I mean? Like we were all hanging out, everybody was hanging out, having a good time. We went to a house party after that. The house party turned into everybody kind of going their own direction and certain people going to do certain things. Certain people went home, certain people went to their apartments. We're all in dorms, so like everybody's close. So it just we were in a room, the three of us, and we kind of just went for it.
It sounds like it. Looking back on those early sexual experiences, how did you figure out what you were into?
I YouTubed a lot.
Mm.
Um, I don't remember if everybody remembers, but there was a video, a YouTuber, I forget his name, but he would do YouTube videos on like being queer. And I remember the first time ever seeing somebody douche because he douched on YouTube. Do you remember this video?
I do not. No, I wish I had had this video, but that did not exist when I was that age.
So yeah, so basically it's a YouTube video and he's like has like a curtain like on the back half of his body and like so you can't really see his ass or anything, but like
Uh-huh.
you get the concept of what we're doing here. And they show you a douche and how to douche, and they talk about how to douche and things like that. And so when I first ever started like having gay sex, I really was like, "Yeah, I don't know that that's for me." All the prep time, all the stuff people were doing. Some of my friends were not eating. I'm like, how are you not eating? I'm not going on a date to not eat. Like, the whole point I'm on this date is for the free food. So, like, there's no way. So from there was kind of when I was like, I don't think this is for me. So my sexual journey really like evolved itself over the years. I actually have been atop a majority of my life, which is funny because I get a lot of different answers from a lot of different people, but a majority of my journey has been being a top. I feel like the only times I've ever actually not feel like it is the truth. The only times I ever bottom has been for people that I have been in a relationship with, people who I felt a lot more comfortable with. I always felt like if this is a hit it and quit it situation, you don't get the ability to get that close to me.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of the same way about topping, which is funny because most people are that way about bottoming. But just for me, it's kind of like this is a special thing that is just not handed out. Bottoming, on the other hand, maybe not as different. But... So you've been a top most of your life. You're figuring out on YouTube. That is, again, just like a generational difference because I just did not have access to that. So that's really kind of amazing to have that kind of resource, as well as your friends, it sounds like, were also a resource around sexuality. Yeah, that's amazing. Are there things you think resources that you wish you had had at that age? Because I'm just looking, I'm like, man, it sounds like you had a lot of assets to kind of understand sex and sexuality.
Yeah, I think yes. I think I wish there was better places to talk about certain pieces of sex. Like, yes, we had these videos about like douching and things like that, but at the end of the day, they weren't really they could give you a concept in your brain, but you have to kind of like really go out of your way to like research more and get to learn more and get a little deeper because they were so high level, right? Like even back in the day, we had rules on YouTube. You can only go so far. You know what I mean? So I do feel like I do wish there was some more resources. I also wished back then that we talked more just about sex in itself, like sex education. I remember being in middle school in New York, and this could be like moving from New York to going to Florida. The curriculum in general, like from grade to grade and your entire life, like you are genuinely taught less in Florida than you are in New York. And so it was shocking to me to kind of go from New York to Florida, and really understand the fact that like academically you're so far ahead, they didn't even have certain classes to put me in. Um, I didn't do a gym class my junior or senior year because I already had all the credits that I needed to graduate high school, which I found crazy considering if I would have stayed in New York, I would have had to continue to do gym till I graduated high school. You know what I mean? So like there were certain pieces that I thought were really interesting. And part of that was kind of like this sex education, home economics, things like that. When I was in middle school, and I'm sorry to the middle school if you guys get in trouble for this, but we used to have like a shop class where you had to like do oil changes on the teacher's cars and like build a bridge and all that kind of stuff. And like I learned a lot about like building stuff, doing stuff around the house, those types of things that I don't think kids are learning today. I learned a lot about cooking in school, which was crazy. I learned how to make pasta. We made Rice Krispie treats. We made a bunch of different things. So those like really like day-to-day types of things, I think we should have. And part of that, I think, is that sex education. We shouldn't sit people in front of this old movie where private parts tinkle and like that's how we're teaching sex, right? I think that's why I find your podcast so interesting, and like some of the stuff that you do. I've read your book, stuff like that. We've talked about some of these things because I find it so interesting that now we have, not that we've never had resources, but like now they're so easy to obtain for queer people today to listen to a podcast and relate to other people's stories or hear different pieces of life. You can watch a bathhouse on the internet. Before we had to go on LimeWire and try to download something and hope that it wasn't, the president saying that he didn't have sexual relations with that woman.
Do you remember when Madonna she leaked her album and then she was like screaming F you at that? Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Throwback to the older listeners to the podcast. Yeah, totally. So do you remember differences in that sex ed, like specifically things that you learned in New York that like just were absent in Florida? Because I'm sure there were many things.
Florida had no sex ed.
There you go. Everything. It was just
Yeah,
absent.
everything was different. Yeah, we had no sex ed in Florida, none whatsoever. What we did have in our school was a parenting class where they made you take a baby home. And I was like, we're teaching these people how to care for a child, but we're not teaching them about condoms.
America is quite an amazing place. I can imagine that was a jarring experience to head down to Florida. I see that with my students in North Carolina. We don't have consistent sex ed across the state, and their knowledge is pretty limited. Even with the resources you mention, you have to go find those resources. They don't come to you. So if you don't know how or where to look, you're in the dark. And so I think many Americans, even though all the information ever created is like here, right? Like we still are very ignorant about so many things, especially sex. So I'm glad you found that douching video on YouTube, because it's just an example of one of those things that like they certainly don't teach you in school. We can't even fathom a world where that might be true, but as a gay man, like
I'll send it to you so you can link the link down below.
Okay, yeah, check the link down below.
We'll send you the early 2000s douche prepping sex video.
That's amazing. So you're in Florida, you're having this relationship, you go off to college. What kinds of sexual experiences did you have? Do you remember sexual experiences where you felt like you learned valuable lessons about yourself or your sexuality or sex in general?
A lot of lessons. Where would you like me to start in lessons I've learned from people?
How many frogs did you have to kiss?
Right. So I would say, in kind of just thinking about my early years of figuring out being queer, figuring out the things that I liked, wanting to try things and being fearful of some of those things. I grew up in a time frame where sex was still really talked about in a very negative way, especially in like my household and like just the people that I kind of communicated with. A lot of people always constantly, really focused on like not having sex till you get married type of stuff, those types of things. And I never understood how somebody can get married without test driving the car. You know what I mean? I don't know if anybody else can really think about it, but for me, I knew that if I wanted to get into a relationship and really care for somebody, that if that part of me was not to the standards of what I wanted it to be, that I would not be fully invested, right? So knowing that I kind of already knew my entire life that sex was a part of my love language, it's a part of my attention, it's a part of getting to know me in a much deeper level. And so in that time frame, I wanted to experiment and find things and get to know people that maybe could take me to some of these places where I didn't feel so alone, right? And so like, I don't know about most people, but going to your first bathhouse is terrifying. The only person I've ever heard talk about that was RuPaul in RuPaul's book. RuPaul talks about the first time kind of going to this cruising spot and kind of getting there, but never actually going in, right? And then like going there a couple of times and then finally like getting the energy and the want to actually like walk through the door. And I think being able to kind of meet other people and kind of go through that was what helped me kind of get to those points in life and meet people that would encourage me to maybe explore and see these things. And some of the things that I've learned from going to some of these places and being a college student at that time was that college kids, some of them are nasty. It doesn't matter how gay you are, you're not always clean. And I never understood that. And so, that was really where I would say I learned the most about myself, what I'm willing to put up with and not put up with. for me, cleanliness is a huge thing and a huge turnoff. If, I understand that gay sex, for instance, is not always the cleanest situation, but it doesn't have to always smell terrible, right?
Yes.
So,
Well, yeah, that's a base level kind of thing. Yeah.
right, it's like pretty bare minimum. So, like, those were things that I learned in that time frame of life was like, hygiene was huge for me. If, somebody and people, you could call me shallow in the comments, I don't care. But like, if there is a bad smell, I already know that that is going to be a huge turnoff. Like, I will not be able to even perform because I know that, like, in my head, it's already going to turn me off and it's already going to kill the whole vibe. So those were things that I learned the very hard way in these stages of like, you're in front of somebody and like, you just can't get hard. Like, that's the craziest moment in your life where you're like, am I broken?
Yeah, I mean, the human body will betray you sometimes. Even if you want it to work, it might not always work. But again, you've breezed past something that I think you must now unpack, which is your first trip to the bathhouse. What was that like?
Yeah, so my first trip to the bathhouse was interesting. I went to a bathhouse in Clearwater, Florida. If anybody is listening from Clearwater, Florida, you probably know. But you walk in, it was interesting. I didn't do anything with any other partners in that first kind of walk through and like getting to the bathhouse. I did go with one of my friends who, after 2 seconds of walking in the door, was gone.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Left me completely alone.
Great
And
friend. Yep.
then when I found him later, he was in a room with like 5 other dudes. And I was like, thanks for leaving me high and dry, but get it, girl. Like, I'm not going to yuck your yum. Get in that. So I spent just a lot of time like walking around and getting to understand what was going on, trying to map in my head, like, how do you even communicate in these places? Like, not a single person was speaking, basically. You have these different rooms where people are doing all kinds of different stuff. There is, a large number of people that I was highly uninterested in. So I thought, just kind of taking it all in and understanding what it was, and then remembering you're in Clearwater, Florida.
Yes.
So that should tell you a little bit about like who's there, right? But it was interesting. It was an adventure for sure. And then I went to one other bathhouse in my life, which was in New York. I went with a couple of friends on a trip. We went to New York. We had a great time. We went to the bathhouse and, I indulged in a couple of different things in the bathhouse. I just never felt that that was my place. What has always driven me is the like intimacy of sex. It's more of the foreplay and the journey versus the end results. So my whole journey has always been that. It's like, really, I like the foreplay. I like making out. I like touching each other. I like going from one room to another room, throw you on a washing machine and turn it on. Like, I like to have sex for a long time. I like to enjoy the journey, experience it, be in the moment. And I felt like the bathhouse was fun. I went with my friends because they wanted to go. So I wasn't like going to be the Debbie Downer and not go. You get a blowjob and you walk out of the bathhouse. Like, it's really not, I never thought that you're not going to find the love of your life in the dark rooms of a bathhouse.
Well, that, but probably not. But who knows? Stranger things have happened.
Maybe.
Where did you feel like, when did you start feeling like you were having sex where you were like, this is amazing? Like, this is what sex should be?
So when I got into my first, what I would consider like real relationship, I was in a relationship for almost 5 years. We got engaged. So I would say it was a very serious relationship.
Yes.
This was the first relationship where I lived with the person, introduced them to my entire family. A lot of different pieces of my life kind of went into that. And oddly enough, I was pretty much a just regular person, just living life, kind of working, doing things in my relationship, kind of in this bubble. But our intimate moments were extremely intimate. And we did, we met in Florida because I had moved back after Kentucky and stuff. We met in Florida. We ended up moving to Virginia together. So like we spent a lot of time and moved and stuff like that. But that was when I can say was like my initial um person that I felt like this was what I wanted. This was like, most of the crazy movie type, you get home from work, start making out at the door. By the time you get upstairs, you're naked, you're in the shower, you're bathing. Like all of that to me is part of that sex journey and part of that like arousal and getting people to that point. So, that was the first person that I really feel like I had sex that I genuinely enjoyed consistently. Um, as we kind of got to know each other more and experienced more. And that was the first person that I truly let myself go sexually for, where I bottomed, we would tie each other up, we would play with toys, like all of the things. I was here for anything that would extend the playtime.
Yeah, I hear you talking about time a lot. What does that mean to you?
I feel like our lives are consistently on 1,000. I know that most of us today, anybody listening to this podcast can probably say, damn, it's already the 8th of January well, cut that. It's already we're already almost in February, right? And like so many people can always constantly just be pushing ahead. Like, can't believe we made it to 2025 already. So I think time is going so fast. Yes, I like to take time and spend it with my friends, and I like to take time to, just enjoy life. I take time and sit at the beach, things like that. I think that ability to cut those minutes out of your day to enjoy it and to just experience it and live in the moment, we don't do enough of it. And there's some of us that don't do any of it. And weirdly enough, I had an extremely close relationship with my grandmother, which most Hispanics, I would say, do. And my grandmother used to constantly tell me in my very early years of life, like, take a moment and like smell the roses, look at the roses, pluck a rose, clean the rose, put it in a vase, right? Like, don't only stop to smell the rose, but like take one, enjoy it for the 7 days it might be alive, and like be in the moment for that and enjoy those pieces of life. And oddly enough, she traveled a lot. She would, you would call her sometimes and she would be like, oh, I'm not home, I'm in Canada, or like on a cruise or something like that. And so I find time to be so invaluable to just giving it away for like work and stuff like that. You've got to take it and enjoy it, because before you know it, you're going to be dead.
Ha, yeah.
And then what do you do then, right? Like you can't take time with you. So like you can crunch as much stuff into time. But unfortunately for me, I really like to take the time to get to the nut, because the nut is 10 seconds.
Sure. Yeah, I get that. I mean, like, it's a small part of the experience. I guess the sort of finale, the grand finale, but it's not a grand finale if there's not a show before it. So, like, it kind of has to balance out. So, that's kind of what I hear you saying. But I also feel like I hear you saying something about that sex may be one area of our lives where we break free from the kind of regimented life that we live.
Yeah, I 100% believe that. I think a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people take sex, and maybe this is like in the straight world, just because like everybody's doing stuff and like you're just taking sex as like a 10-second thing. Like, oh, let me, I talk to like my straight friends and like all of them talk about sex being 10 minutes.
Right.
And to me, I just can't fathom that.
Yeah.
You want me to do all of this work for 10 minutes?
Yeah, I have a friend who jokes like if the sex is not, it doesn't take as long as it took me to clean out, then like it was not worth it.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's crazy to me, to be able to think that you are willing to put so much effort for something that's going to last as long as a high. Smoke a blunt and just enjoy that high. Like,
you
it's
could
going to
do
last
both,
longer. You could do both, right? True.
That's a very interesting perspective, because I've heard other guests sort of like TT Bomb was talking about sex as adult playtime. And I think that speaks to a similar element, that it takes us out of the normal constraints of day-to-day life, and time is one of those. So I just wanted to kind of draw that out because I think that's an interesting perspective.
Like, think about it. Would you take your child or your dog to the dog park for 5 minutes?
Right. I don't know.
You wouldn't, right? You're going to take your kid to the park because you want your kid to run around in circles and be exhausted after. So why would you think that, adult playtime, I love that terminology of like, this is our time to be able to explore each other and get to know what each other likes. And maybe if you're in a relationship or not in a relationship, if you are having a sexual encounter, granted, there are people out here that only care about their own nut and not always other people's nuts, which that's a battle on the internet forever.
Uh-huh.
But I think ultimately, if you're having a sexual experience and you're with someone else and you care about their journey in that moment and your own, maybe they like things you don't. And so maybe you do some of that and some of what you like, and you kind of go along through the game, right? Like, I'm the type of person where if there's something that I don't necessarily like for myself, but you like it to be done to you, I would do that, even if it's not 100% of a turn on for me in that moment, because the trade-off is that you're going to do something that I like after. And we can continue to explore what we do and don't like. And maybe there are things that you come to a point where you're like, this is a hard no for me. But you won't figure that out unless you try and experiment in these different pieces.
Yeah, there's yeses, there's nos, but there's also this stuff in the middle that's like, I don't know, maybe. And you kind of have to play with that and let other people, it's a push and pull, certainly, a negotiation to figure out what that ideal situation looks like, what the maximum potential of two people coming together could be.
Right.
What does the best sex look like for you?
Oh, I've been thinking about this a lot.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of things that go into it. I like it to be, first of all, it needs to be long.
Yeah.
If we're not passing 30 minutes, this was a quickie and this is taking too fast and I'm probably ready for round 2 because we didn't go long enough, right? So it's got to be long. It's got to be spontaneous.
Interesting.
Don't send me a calendar invite for 2 weeks from now, right? Like, don't pencil me in between your meetings. That's not, to me, that doesn't give me a turn on of like, oh my God, you were thinking about me and you just, wanted to right now. Like, let's just go. Like, I want it to be spontaneous. I want it to be in the moment. Like, we should be doing something and just have fun. But ultimately, like, long play is my gig. Like, my biggest funnest things is like going out to dinner with a vibrator butt plug in, and I just control it while we're having dinner and having a good time. Then you come back to the house, like, you keep it going, and it just lasts a long time of like that excitement of what's going to happen next, where are we going to go, what are we going to do, those types of things. I feel like makes it more of a game and more fun and more interactive. And we're not just like, plowing each other and just moving on. We're really getting to know each other a lot more. We're getting to know what our limits are, right? You're getting to learn what your thresholds are for certain pieces of sex. And we all take different levels of pain. We all take different levels of restraints, right? I'm a person that I love tying people up. You're not tying me up though. There's no way.
Yeah.
So like, I think we all learn those pieces of ourselves as we kind of go through this journey of figuring those little things out. But ultimately, best sex for me is something that takes time and is spontaneous, but has like reason and attention and a real story to it.
Huh. Can you think of a time where, like, what if you were gonna? And I'm sure there are many encounters, right? And so, no diss to any other story in your Rolodex, but like, is there a time that comes up where you're like, that was it? Like, man, that was pinnacle sex.
Yes. I would say so. Let me set the tone. I want to say, yeah, it was like wintertime. Yeah, wintertime. So it's cold out. So you can wear like clothes. Like, you can put on a jacket, you can put on a lot of stuff. So I would say sex that I remember the best is, a lot of foreplay. So went out to dinner, a lot of foreplay. We had I forget what the thing is called, but anyway, it's like a little plug that you put in. You can control it on your phone and you go to dinner, great conversation, normal conversation at the table, work, life, goals, things like that. But you can play with the app, turn it up, turn it down, things like that. Somebody's ordering food, you turn it up. How do you interact with other people that have no idea what's going on? So like that type of fun to me is really interesting, and it really shows you a different side of people. The sex encounter is much longer, right? You're starting really from before you even leave the house, and it goes through the dinner and getting back and kind of not even really making it into the house before you're like kind of going at it and really getting started, going into the home, showering together, like that whole journey. And then propping them up on top of the washing machine and turning that thing on is my favorite thing. And at that
Really?
time, yes, at that time, I lived in this small apartment. I had a washing machine that had to be from like the 80s or 90s. That when you turn that thing on, it shook the whole house.
It's a speed queen, probably. I know
I don't
exactly
know
the
what
type.
the name was, but it would make a lot of noise and it would shake the whole house. And so, that was like part of that adventure. And then it's kind of going from there, going to our room, finishing in there, and then spending that time after, not only like just there, like cuddling and talking and things like that, but like, taking the time to, are you okay? Does anything hurt? Is it okay what we've done? Like things that you like, don't like, things like that. And kind of going over the encounter, what their favorite parts were, what my favorite parts were, and kind of talking about that journey together, especially right after it happened, so that we're able to clearly kind of rethink the evening and really understand like where the hard no's are. You know what I mean? Because that was always my biggest thing, was if there is a hard no, really learning that and remembering that, because, I want to be able to push my boundaries and push their boundaries and get to know all the things we do like and don't like. But you also want to be like considerate of like what other people feel and what they like and don't like, and really asking. Most people may not even tell you if you don't ask.
So I'm just noticing that you're using a lot of terms that are so close to ideas in the BDSM world, but are not. Like aftercare, for example, is a way that people in BDSM talk about that moment after, where you check in and you kind of, it can be quite emotional to sort of go through the encounter and make sure that everyone's okay and check on those limits. That would be another word that like is. So I'm just curious, are you is BDSM, like, is that a framework that you feel, because you mentioned restraint as well? I'm just trying to piece it all together.
Yeah, I don't consider myself a person in the BDSM space, because there are a lot of things that I don't personally like or would not do to myself or other people. But there are things that I do like. Like, I believe in tying people up. I think if in a very safe and understanding way, you can use string and things like that for not only tying someone up, but the textures, the way it feels on your body, the way that maybe you can tie somebody's chest so that you feel like that pressure that maybe you can't do with like your hand or your arm, but you can like rope in the chest part and then pull from the back, and like it'll compress, kind of like that, almost like a full body hold type thing. So there's like pieces of it that I think are really interesting. And I think this is part of what I mean by, you don't necessarily have to become, a queen of a dungeon to enjoy certain pieces of BDSM or any other, things that people enjoy. And I think being able to experiment in those spaces, everybody should have those opportunities and feel that it's okay. Because I do feel like a lot of these spaces are gatekept. A lot of these spaces are not talked about. A lot of these spaces, a lot of people just try to steer people away from. And I think unless you know for a fact that you've tried something and you don't like it, it's very hard to say that you don't like it. You might be surprised, at the end.
Yes, well, hopefully you're surprised in some way. It's always good to be a little surprised with sex. I find that really interesting because those are principles that are more universal than they're generally regarded as. So I just wanted to take a moment to check in on that because, especially with the aftercare stuff, it's just it's fascinating to me that we need a word for that. Just the idea that you might talk to someone about the sex you just had. Most of us don't. We're just terrified. What do you learn from your partners in those moments?
Oof, you learn a lot. You learn the main thing that you learn is how close you really are with that other sexual partner. If it's a one night stand, they're probably not going to say anything, right? So if you do have like a one night stand and you try to like check in and stuff, if they haven't already grabbed their clothes and got out, you're probably not going to get that far in that conversation. Most of the people that I've had sex with in my life, I've been in relationships with, so in those relationships, I've always taken a lot more time at that because I also feel like that's a time for us to connect. That's a time for us to, if everything is okay with sex and things like that, we can also talk about other things. We can also move into other conversations. We can, kind of get that conversation out of the way. And then you also learn like pieces of it that maybe people didn't like, or moments that maybe you were too aggressive or not aggressive enough, or things like that, where not everybody's comfortable to like stop in the middle and be like, yeah, like be more aggressive or, whatever. Most people will use a safe word and, you're being too aggressive, but some people are afraid to tell you to be more aggressive or to do something specific. And I think those are the moments where you can kind of check that off your list and say, okay, this is something that they said that I didn't do now, but maybe I'll try the next time. And because I do like sex to be more spontaneous, you want to know those things ahead of time, because if you do have another encounter either quickly or later or whatever, you want to try to remember those things so that their experience is better every single time.
Yeah. I think people are, especially after a very intense encounter, it can be a very vulnerable state. And so I think that's why one night stands hit the road, is because there's a recognition that of that vulnerability and a fear. I think people are scared of what they might say or do in that post nut clarity moment or whatever, that can be
Yeah.
quite intense. So I appreciate that perspective because we haven't talked about it so much on the show, but I think aftercare, or whatever we want to call it, is so critical
Yeah, I think
because
it's more than just aftercare. I think that's the difference. I think aftercare, especially like in the BDSM world, is really used around the, really understanding of like, are you hurt? Are things okay? Was something too hard? Things like that. Where I think we should really get to the point where if you're having multiple sessions with similar partners, right? Because if it's a one night stand, I mean, grab your shit and go. I mean, what can I say? But if you're really trying to continuously have sex with the same partner, wouldn't you want it to get better? Wouldn't you want it to improve? It's not going to happen just out of the blue. It's not just going to miraculously get better the next time if you don't actually talk about it and express how this could have been better.
amen. Communication. It's like it's such a fundamental, basic idea, but it's so many of us don't practice it and we wonder why we don't have great sex. Amen. Communication is key. I always like to end with my favorite segment, Sordid Lives and Untold Tales. Slut for short. What's the sluttiest thing you ever did?
Ooh, okay. I said that I would be very open on this podcast. So I'm going to be very open in this podcast. Um, so sluttiest thing I've ever did. I was in college. I went to a college party and we got way too drunk. Like, it was bad. Like, cops showed up, everything. It was a mess. Like, the worst party I ever went to in my life. But halfway through the party, so it's like an apartment. It's a dorm, but like it's not a regular college dorm. They're apartments that are just on campus. So it's a typical apartment. You walk in, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, blah blah blah. Balcony, beautiful. So walk into the back room and there is an entire orgy going on in this back room. And so I joined in and just kind of got to start indulging into the different things. And that was the first time ever in my life that I tried to bottom, like just whimsily, because there was this guy in the room that I found very, 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 very attractive back then. And I kind of didn't want to say no, and I didn't want to like miss my opportunity, I guess. And yeah, and he didn't actually top me.
Oh.
And my emotions were broken. So I topped the guy next to him and then I left. So that is the sluttiest thing I ever did in a quick moment.
College parties. I mean, that sounds ruckus with the police coming. So I'm glad it was that you walked out of that party safe and sound.
Yeah. I mean, they weren't going to take me. The cops weren't going to take me.
Yeah, you taking me. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Well, of course, you have your podcast, Girl By, which people can find online. Where can they find that? Where can they find you? How can people find more about you?
Yeah, so you can find the Girl By podcast at Girl By MO on Instagram, TikTok, all the social platforms. You can also listen to the podcast on YouTube and Spotify. And yeah, season 2 is coming out next year. This is the official place I will announce season 2 coming out. So
But you mean this year, right?
yeah, this year,
This year.
2025.
It's here.
I'm still in 2024. I'm still in 2024.
Tell me about it. I feel you.
Yeah. But
Oh.
everybody should be on the lookout. Girl By Season 2 is really focused around education and, you know, getting more people to talk about their lives. I think we don't spend enough time highlighting queer people. And, you know, your podcast, Girl By Podcast, you know, if you have anybody that you're listening to that's queer, we should continue to promote these things because only us can educate each other. And, you know, clearly the schools are not doing it. And who knows if we even have a board of education next year.
Oy vey. Yes, amen to that. So thank you for doing the hard work of helping educate the world about queer people and lifting up those stories, because I think that's so valuable, especially over the next couple of years. So thank you, Manny. Thank you for your time and your insights. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime. I had a blast. And this is the best gay sex podcast on the internet.
That's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening. Really please. And if you enjoy the show, take a second, give us a review on Apple, Spotify, whatever platform you use. Really, it means a lot and will help spread the message to other people. So thank you. And as always, remember, if you are not having your best gay sex or someone in your life is not having their best gay sex, I can help. My services as a sex coach can help you or your friend identify and overcome those obstacles that are standing between you and your best sex life. Find out more on my website, thebestgaysex.net. Till next time.